front of us. And today we're going to talk and have a conversation that a lot of people are having right now. As we get into the new year, people start to come off the holidays. They start to get ready for pricing their houses and getting their houses on the market. We touched on this in last week's episode, but today we're going to kind of dig into probably one of the most widely asked questions, and rightfully so, and that we get from people over places, the price of the house. So welcome to For Real. I'm Michael Barbaro. And today with me is Jacob Miller, my other business partner. Typically, Stephanie is with me. She had some issues to take care of today, some personal matters, but Jake will fill in flawlessly, I assure you. Welcome, Jake.
Thank you so much. I know I got some big shoes to fill here, but I'm gonna do my best.
Good. Let's get started. What do you got for us here?
So again, to reiterate, one of the top three, if not the number one question that we get from our clients is, how do we actually go about valuing a house that we have to sell or a property that we're thinking about making an offer on? So where should people start? I've heard it a couple times. I know our clients have heard it, but tell us kind of like the three things that start almost every conversation that you have with your clients about value.
Yeah. And I'll try and be specific about, even though it's the same calculations, I'll try and keep it strictly to getting your house ready for listing today. I want to step back 1 second, right? And interesting, we don't see ourselves as salespeople. I was in a call last week and someone mentioned, I try and get people that are in sales and I try and get them into real estate. And I just have a different perspective. I don't look at us as sales. I look at us as there's an element of what we do, which is marketing, but I see us more as consultants, right? We're here to bring you our expertise. Whoever you as a consumer seller are working with, you have to have that same relationship. You don't want someone who's just going to tell you whatever you want. You certainly don't want someone who's going to ask you what your favorite number is so you can come up with a price on your house. And I've heard that. In my own company, and that it's come across many years ago. That doesn't happen anymore. So it's important again that you play a part in this. And so I just want to clear. You should be, as a consumer seller, you should be trying to talk to as many people as you can, get as much knowledge and information as you can, and go with whoever you feel the most comfortable with. That is a very important part of this transaction, is the pricing of the transaction. Now, I'll go back to your original question, right? I have a three-pronged approach. The first thing is, what do I think your house would appraise for, right? Appraisal is fickle. I think we'll do a segment at least of a show on appraisal and why I think it's absolutely archaic and I don't even understand it anymore. But an appraisal is an opinion of market value, right? So there are specific professionals, licensed real estate appraisers that will come in and they will put a value on your house. They will give you an opinion of what they believe market value. There's an important little nuance in there. Market value and opinion, right? So the first part, opinion, in the year 2026, with all the data we have, opinions kind of is not the word I really want to hear. But really what they're giving you is an opinion of market value. And the definition of market value is, what is a ready, willing, and able buyer? Now, ready, we know what that means. Willing, I want to buy this property. Able to buy this property. Am I qualified? Do I have enough money in the bank to buy this house for that price? Am I pre-qualified with a lender to buy this house at that price? So an appraisal, to go back, is an opinion of market value at any point in time. And so what is a ready, willing, and able buyer willing to pay for my property? Now, I'll always run through that because appraisals, most of the transactions that we deal with are financed.
Right.
So I'm always going to start with, what do I think as your agent I could justify, I can make a case for, I could provide support documentation to your appraisal, to your bank, to your lender, your loan officer, of the value of this property.
Right.
And so, but that's a very different animal, like we always talk about, of what is a house actually, what is it worth?
Right.
And what are buyers in the marketplace willing to pay for it? And that's where you come into market value or marketability or things like that.
Yeah, that's where it transitions, I think, from being a kind of science into an art.
Right.
And I think one of the things that people really kind of hammer in on the appraisal and the close comps, But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand is how critical timing and competitive listed properties at the time that you're going on the market are when you're kind of finalizing your pricing strategy. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. The other thing I will tell you is this. If I sat down with you today as a seller, what I would tell you to put your property on the market for today would be entirely different than maybe what I decide to put it on in a week.
100%.
So often we're sitting with people long before they want to put their house on the market. Sometimes it's just a couple of weeks. They're just getting the floors refinished, or they're just getting the basement decluttered or the garage decluttered. But even if it's within a couple of weeks, typically, as you know, the day before we list a property, we will rerun the scenario, and we will look at different elements and different factors and determine, do we need to adjust our price before we go to market?
Right.
And so those factors are largely driven by, what is your competition, right? What are the people that are going to be coming to see your house? What else are they going to see, and how do you compare to that?
Right.
You don't want to be the highest price in the group. You don't want to be the lowest price in the group. I think you hit that nail on the head when you said, this is where it switches from more of a data-driven science to an art form. Now, I'm gonna air quotes science on the and data-driven on the other side.
Yeah.
Because we'll come back and we'll talk about appraisal at some point in time. But it is more scientific on the appraisal side. It is more data-driven. The data is extremely limited.
Yeah.
It's static. It's rear-facing. But what we're really most interested in is what is out there for buyers. What is your competition, and where does your property fit in with that with that
Absolutely.
grouping?
Absolutely. While we're on the topic of value in general, I think another thing that we hear a lot about, people get a copy of their their property tax bill, or they're looking their property up in vision appraisal or on the assessor's field card, and they see this assessed value number.
Yeah.
And a lot of people love to say, well, the assessed value of my property is this, so I should list it for that.
Yeah.
What is assessed value?
Well, let's start here. First of all, assessed value was the bane of my existence in the beginning of my career, right? Because regardless of what we said, our clients would always revert back to what was their assessed value of their property, right? Today, that's transitioned, and more people are now using a Zestimate, right, from Zillow, or other automated valuation models. Every company has one, and many lenders, and so on and so forth. But let's talk a little bit about it. The assessment of your house. Once every 5 years, the municipality that your house is located in will go out and reevaluate your property. And really what they're trying to do, it's less driven by very accurate value and more driven by trying to parallel your property to other properties in your marketplace, so that you pay your fair share of the overall grand list, the overall budget for that town.
Yep.
So looking at that, number one, it could be incredibly accurate if it was just done, but if it was done 4 years ago or a year ago, like during COVID, if it was done in 2019, at a year later, you would have been looking at a very, very far off estimate of your value. So we're going to ask our clients always, please disregard the assessed value. We understand we could have a much more detailed conversation about it and help you understand that. But we don't want you to make any reliance on that. What we're looking for is real market data when we come up with the value of your house. But that was a good point, also, and I do want to segue. I think we're coming up on a break here. What do we have? We have about a minute. When we come back, I'd like to, before we get into what the next topics are, I'd like to talk about a little bit about the Zestimate and other valuation, automated valuation models. And like I said, everybody seems to have them, and what you should look out for, what you should be careful of, and where they work and where they don't work. And
I think the topic of assessed value kind of ties right into that, because whether it's accurate or it's inaccurate, it's a tangible figure that somebody can look at from a person of authority and say, well, at a very minimum, this is a starting place for how I put a value on this property that I have. So, I think this is getting into valuation models from here is a logical.
We'll stop here. We'll be back right after the break. All right, we're back, and I think where we left off was on talking about Zestimates and other automated valuation models that are out there in the marketplace. I want to talk about two things about this, right? You touched on one right as you were getting out of that, and I thought it was an important aspect of it. It's instantaneous, right? You don't have to call someone like me up, set up an appointment, clean your house so I could come by and take a look at it.
Right.
I absolutely do not do this, but some agents are going to sit there and walk you through their table tent on why they're the best and this, that, and the other thing. You just want to know the value of your house. It's not always for selling it, right? It's maybe you just tracking your wealth.
You're tracking your net worth. You just want to know, kind of a general idea of what you might net if you were to sell. It's just purely informational. It's like keeping track of your stock portfolio or the value of your car. It's at the end of the day, as opposed, in addition to being a place where you live and spend time with your family and friends, it is an asset at the end of the day.
Right. So it's painless, it's instant, and one of the things that I find is regardless of how much information I give people on it's, particularly in Connecticut and particularly in certain parts of Connecticut, where it's just really, really difficult for that type of a system to be accurate, people always gravitate back toward it, right? So you have this conversation, we have this explanation, and then they're like, but the Zestimate or the Realtor.com, at Realtor.com, I believe, has 3 different values. I'm sure Homes.com has one. A lot of brokers have them, lenders. But it says this, and that is where it boils down. Again, it's less scientific, more data-driven, more blind kind of study. It's not seeing it. Doesn't know the condition of your house. Now, they're getting more sophisticated, and if your house has pictures of it up online, they can start to use machine learning and computer vision to evaluate the condition of your house, although images can be. So I'm sure they're getting better, and they're getting better. But in an area, in a state like Connecticut, where our housing stock is so old and so diverse, I live in an area of New Haven. I live near the water. I have multi-million-dollar homes on my street, and I live next door to an abandoned shack. And so it would be hard to, based on the proximity and the neighborhood, to come up with valuation in my neighborhood. So
and in addition to the housing stock, on the single family side being diverse, there's also, towns like New Haven have such a high concentration of multifamily housing, which you just can't use the kind of traditional comparative market analysis to put value on something in a finite geographic area when you have 2 and 3 family houses on the same street or a couple streets away from larger single family houses, condominiums, and things of that nature.
Yeah, particularly like you said in metropolitan areas like New Haven, and rents are going to play a huge factor into the values of those properties, as opposed to the traditional comparative market analysis, which is what are the other houses worth and what have other houses of similar characteristics sold for.
100%.
So you're right there. The other part of this problem. Now, do they work in some parts of the country? Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
If you're, somewhere out in West or I don't know, in the Carolinas, and you have a 1,000-lot subdivision and there's 3 different models, sure, then you can tell what is a good market value based on the last, 20 or 30 houses that have sold right in the last month.
Yeah, if you're comparing apples to apples, and one has 2.5. 2.5 bathrooms and the other has 2, you can put a pretty finite value on, that half bath. But here, those kind of traditional characteristics that the AVMs use just often aren't super correlated with market value.
Right. So we're going to wrap up here with that. We're just, before we move back into, the things about your valuation. But I think it was an important nuance to this, to look, by all means, see what the town has your property valued at. And by the way, just a close the gap on that. Your assessed value is actually 70% of what the town believes
Yes.
your market value is.
Right.
Which is a shell game in my opinion. But but regardless of that, if you want that, if you need something quick, you could look at that. If you need something quick, you could look at Zillow and the Zestimates and Realtor.com, and there are 3 different versions of it, and every other one that's out there. But if you're getting ready to put your property on the market, you absolutely need to have a real estate professional come to your home, see the condition of your home, see what your neighborhood is looking like and what the properties around you. These are the factors that people just don't take into the equation, and these are the factors that switch it from a science to more of an art form. So, all right, so let's get back into it. We're going to go 3 things, right? Number 1, what do we think we can get your house to appraise for? That's critical in the way the residential industry works today and the way the residential industry market. That appraised value is essential to you getting your financing, right?
Yes.
So we do need to be cognizant of what your house could and would appraise out for. So we have to make sure, as your consultant, as your professional, that we could justify that and we can believe that it would get to that point.
Before we move on from appraisal to the other 2, something I want to drill in on, because you brought up financing, and I think that's critical, especially as a seller, that's a critical thing to consider when you're finally at the point where you have priced your property and you're looking at offers. What happens relative to different financing types when a property underappraises? You think, we think we have a solid case for appraisal, and we go under contract with a specific buyer, and a property underappraises.
Yeah.
But how does that work?
Yeah, well, it depends, right? Everything is a negotiation. It depends. You could come back and you could renegotiate. You could be the buyer and you can come back and say, look, I offered to give you $575,000 for your home,
Right?
But it only appraised for $570,000, and I don't want to lower my loan to value ratio, or I don't have any equity to put back into this, right? What you're going to do is say, could I get her? I'll buy the property at $570,000. That's what they say it's worth. Well, you may end up with a seller who's either unwilling to do that,
right,
or maybe not in a position to do that. They may have debt service on the property, which exceeds that. They may need a certain amount of money to move on and buy another property. So everything there is going to be kind of conditioned upon the overall transaction. So
right,
is the seller moving into an existing property that they already own, maybe a second property or maybe a vacation home?
Yep.
Or are they using that money to go out and buy? So we're going to have to negotiate that, and we often do.
Yep.
We did see over the period of COVID, we saw a lot of people requesting you waive your appraisal.
Yes.
That's an entirely different
Yes.
show. I think we're going to get into, if not next week, but the following week. Appraisal waivers are one of the most nebulous and what's the word I'm groping for over here? But aspects of the transaction, there's nothing set in stone, right? It's
Right.
all going to be particular to the elements and the details of your particular scenario.
I'll let you finish the rest now. That's a big question we get, so I didn't want to let that one go. But
Yeah. All right. So we need to know about appraisal, and we'll take our way out here, and then when we come back, we'll start to talk about how we actually market the property compared to what is your competition, and then what we believe based on your competition we can expect to sell your home for. And then the third element is, what price do we start at? So why don't we stop there, take a
Yep.
quick break, and come back, and we'll finish up with those other 2. Fair enough?
sounds like a plan.
All right, we'll be back. All right, we're back. Let's finish off here with the 2 other elements. We started out with, we need to do an evaluation of the appraisal. We need to know what the house would appraise for. The next thing we're going to look at is, we're going to look at what is the competition, what are the most recent sales. So effectively, why are we looking at the competition? The reason we're looking at the competition is when on a Saturday morning, when a couple goes out to look at houses, they're going to look at your competition too.
Right.
They're going to look at the 2 or 3 other houses. I mean, inventory is very, very, very slim right now in Connecticut. Lowest it's been in my career. I was somewhere in the 3,000 range right around the holidays. But nonetheless, people are going to be looking at houses. In a more normalized market, and any agent knows this, you might be showing someone 6 or 7 houses.
Right.
Maybe they're in the same town. Maybe they're in the same town. Maybe they're in the same neighborhood. Maybe they're in the same complex. Some are going to be even on the same road. So we want to say, how does my house compare to this? What would I buy? Would I pay $700,000 for this house when this house is on the market for $650,000?
Yep.
And you have to be cognizant of that, because we're going to talk about this a little, hopefully at the end of the show. I think it's worth its own segment. But we're going to talk about the dangers of overpricing a home. And we'll come back to that. So when we're looking at this, we're saying, look, this is what the competition is. And based on the competition, this is what we think we can sell your house for. This is where we think we could achieve. And part of that is element and number 3, right? What is our pricing strategy, right? So we know what we think we can get it to appraise out for.
Yep.
That's our first element.
Yep.
We know what the competition is, right? And we know based on the competition and how long the competition is sitting on the market and how many sales and, the average days on market. Now we want to take a look at what is the strategy to price your house at today. Right? Now, we can only do this once. You only get one first bite at the apple,
right.
But we're going to do that, and we're going to take that out today. Those are the 3 elements. When we come into your kitchen, when we sit down with you, we're going to be looking at to get your house priced right. I think we should touch on, since we're talking about pricing, and I think next week we can get into it a little bit more, but I think we should finish out this week's show and this segment with the dangers of overpricing a home.
Absolutely.
It is incredibly important to properly price a home. Jake and I have known this anecdotally for a long time, but we happen to be working on a piece of software. We bought a piece of technology, and we were going through the training. And the trainer actually said to us, hey, I want to show you guys something cool if you have a little bit of time. And we said, sure. And he took us through this, and he says, look, I want to show you the value of properly pricing a home. And we both looked at each other. We thought that was interesting, yeah. Right? And the long and the short of it is, here's what he told us. If a home has to have a price change somewhere between 1 and 3 price changes before it goes under contract, I believe at the time the average was like 1.9 price changes.
Yep.
But anywhere in there. And it didn't matter what the amount of the price change was. But if you had to put into play a price change, if you had to lower your price before you got an offer, you would ultimately net out 10% less for your house than you would have if you had properly priced it in the beginning.
Yep.
We're going to get into this in how much time do we have in this segment? Yeah, we're going to get into this in much greater detail, because this is probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make all the time.
Yep.
And this is the difference between having a conversation with someone who's just a nice person and a nice professional and maybe a salesperson, and someone who's going to tell you what you need to hear,
Yep.
right?
Because
the conventional wisdom is, if I list my house for $1 million, I can't get $1.2 million for it. If I list it for 6, I can't get 7. So I may as well list it for 7 and someone will offer me 6. It doesn't necessarily work out that way. I think it's a good place for us to start to wrap up here. And next week, I think we should talk, at least in the first 2 segments, I want to get into the pitfalls. I want to get into, my agent's going to be at every showing. I'm going to get into, we're going to price the house here because, I think it's worth that much money, and I want to try it out and see if we can get more money. So,
Yep.
I appreciate you joining me today, filling in for Steph.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see more of you in the future as we talk more and more about investment properties. And,
I look forward to it.
Everybody have a good week, and come ready next week. We'll have some great topics for you to talk about. Thanks for
everybody.
listening.